PAL-V is the world's first flying car. On the road it offers a unique sportive driving experience, and in the air it flies as a gyroplane. This is the easiest and safest way of flying there is. Easier than a fixed wing plane, much easier than a helicopter. In order to develop the product, train the test pilot and allow customers to have a first experience, we have created a dedicated simulator. In this movie, our senior flight dynamics engineer demonstrates the ease of use as well as various safety aspects of the PAL-V.
So welcome to the PAL-V flight simulator. We will now take a look at how the PAL-V flies and drives. We can simulate this really realistically thanks to this advanced physics model that is behind the simulator. The PAL-V flies using the gyroplane or gyrocopter principle. This means that the rotor on top is not powered by the engine, but by the wind instead. The wind comes from underneath through the rotor. This creates a forward lift vector on the rotor blades, and this forward pointing lift on the blades keeps them spinning and keeps the rotor turning at all times during flight. You never have to look at your rotor RPM because it will be self-stabilizing. At the rear of the PAL-V we have the pusher propeller, which is directly coupled to the engine. So the wheels and the rotor are spinning freely in flight mode, but the propeller is powered by the 200 horsepower delivered by the engine. This gives us a maximum of 400 kilograms of thrust, which is more than enough for our vehicle weight of 900 kilograms. Our tail looks more like an aircraft tail than a helicopter tail. This is because the rotor does not exert any moments on the vehicle itself, so we don't need the tail rotor to counteract this. The tail is mainly there to keep the nose pointing straight into the wind. It also prevents you from getting into a dangerous situation when you push the stick all the way forward. The tail actively counteracts the wind coming from the top of the rotor. I will now switch the view to the inside view so you can get a little bit of an idea what it's like to actually be in the PAL-V. So right now we're taxiing to the runway with the rotor stationary, but before we take off we pre-rotate the rotor using an electric pre-rotator. This pre-rotator spins the rotor up to about 50% of the flight RPM, and this dramatically decreases our takeoff distance. The takeoff distance you need with the PAL-V is between 100 and 160 meters, depending on whether you have headwind or your loadout. For takeoff you apply full throttle using your left hand, pull the stick all the way back. This opens up the rotor so it catches most of the wind. It accelerates quickly, and at about 80 kilometers an hour you're already airborne. Immediately after takeoff you can already trim the rotor using the trim controls on the flight stick, and it will automatically keep its speed at the set speed. So the trim system is sort of like a cruise control in a car. It keeps your speed constant. In the PAL-V you only feel about 20% of the gust intensity compared to a normal small airplane. As we reach our cruising altitude we can decrease the throttle and level off. Let's make a turn back to the runway. The optimum cruising speed for the PAL-V is 140 kilometers per hour. This means that you have your maximum range at this speed. At 140 kilometers an hour you have about 400 kilometers range with half an hour of fuel reserve. Between 100 and 160 kilometers an hour you still have 90% of your flight range. The maximum speed in flight is 180 kilometers an hour. So I will now demonstrate a complete engine failure and show you what happens. I turn off the engine. The nose lowers automatically because it wants to keep flying at 140 kilometers an hour. I will now pull back on the stick slightly to slow down to 120 kilometers an hour, which is our best gliding speed. At 120 kilometers an hour, the rotor will still keep spinning about 300 RPM, and you can make a normal approach for a short landing on the runway. I will show you that the propeller is completely stationary at this moment. You can see here at the rear of the vehicle, the propeller is standing still. The rotor still keeps turning at the same RPM. The stick is self-stabilizing still, so it's very relaxed to fly. At 120 kilometers an hour you have a glide rate of about 5.5, which gives you 5.5 kilometers of glide range when you're at 1 kilometer of altitude. Right before landing, you pull back on the stick and you land like a parachute with only 5 meters of run out on the ground. We'll now restart the engine. So let's take off again, and I'll show you the slow flight, and I'll show you how maneuverable the PLV is. But because you don't have a stall speed, you cannot fall out of the air like a fixed-wing airplane. You don't have to worry about stalling at all. The rotor will still keep turning if you go very slowly. So we cannot hover like a helicopter, but we can fly really slowly on a straight line. So our minimum level horizontal airspeed is 50 kilometers an hour, which I'll demonstrate right now. So with the PLV you can fly slowly and low to the ground relatively safely. I will now demonstrate a really steep turn. You can store the vehicle speed in the rotor when you pull up in a corner. So if you pull up on the stick, the rotor will accelerate, the vehicle will slow down, you can make a really short turn, and you get this rotor speed in the form of lift when you turn the other way. This means you can easily avoid obstacles or return from a valley that is too steep to climb out on the other side. The trim system works from all the way from minimum horizontal speed up to the maximum speed of 180 kilometers an hour. So even if you're flying very fast, you can still let go of the stick and don't have to worry about the stability of the PLV. It will still counteract all the disturbances it gets from wind gusts or thermals or other disturbances. Now make another steep turn. I'll show you a vertical descent. So because the rotor still keeps turning when the wind comes from underneath, you can do a safe vertical descent. So if I take the throttle back all the way, pull back on the stick and reduce the vehicle speed, the rotor will still keep turning at 300 RPM. And you come down almost vertically, even going reverse a little bit. You still have full control over the vehicle because the rotor still keep turning, and you can easily turn right, turn left, push forward and pull up. If you want to land from a vertical descent, you do have to apply a little bit of throttle or push the stick forward to make a nice flare for the landing. Alright, that was the flying of the PLV. We have arrived at the parking spot, and unlike all these other aircraft who are stuck at the airport, you can convert the PLV into driving mode and drive off to your destination. So in the real vehicle the steering wheel stays attached, but the stick folds away completely into the seat. In the simulator the conversion from flight to drive mode occurs automatically. In reality you do have to do some manual tasks. In total the conversion from flight to drive mode takes about 10 minutes. Now that the conversion is complete, you can drive away like a normal manual shift car. You have to use the clutch to drive away and switch gears using the sequential manual gearbox. The PAL V is a lot of fun to drive as well, as it tilts into the corners, so it feels like you're flying very close to the ground even when you're driving. The maximum speed on the road is about 170 kilometers an hour. It's also very fuel efficient, as with one tank of gas you can easily get 1200 kilometers of range when driving. I'm accelerating, braking, tilting in the corners. It's a lot of fun to drive. Just turning here to the parking spot. Let's park the PAL V here and call it a day. The PAL V also has a reverse gear, so it's very easy to park. As it's only 4 meters long, it's quite compact. Alright, so now we've parked the PAL V at the airport restaurant. Let's get out and grab a cup of coffee.
In this video we showed the ease of use and the safety aspects of a PAL V. Fly driving your PAL V is within reach now. Whether you are a pilot already or not yet, the PAL V will let you enjoy totally new possibilities and experiences.